Greetings and welcome back to room 303 and Senior A English, and we now are in unit number 2. I'm with you on page 120 and following. Notice that the essential question of unit 2 is, how do people come to have different views of society? We will be working today now in this discussion with the historical perspectives focus period of 1066 to 1485. I'm with you on page 122 and following. Do note the timeline at the bottom of the page. We have voices of the period from the Doomsday Book of 1086, the Magna Carta of 1215. Of course, we've mentioned the Magna Carta already. Notice, no free man shall be seized or imprisoned or stripped of his rights or possessions or outlawed or exiled or deprived of his standing in any other way, nor will we proceed with force against him or send others to do so, except by the lawful judgment of his equals or by the law of the land. To no one will we sell, to no one deny or delay right or justice. It's a compelling idea. Let's look at the history of the period of 1066 to 1485, taking notes as we read. Norman England is our first heading. After his coronation in 1066, William I earned the moniker the Conqueror by subduing rebellions across England and putting his Norman aristocracy in power. The Normans were named so because of the territory that they settled in Normandy, France. They solidified the form of government, social order, and land tenure we call feudalism. Let's make sure we circle that word again, feudalism. A pyramid of power stretching from the king at the peak to nobles and freemen in carefully graded steps below to serfs who till the land at the bottom. Much of what we know about feudal Norman England comes from the Doomsday Book. Let's make sure we put a circle around that. An extraordinary primary source commissioned by William I to record information about the land, resources, and populations of the more than 13,000 settlements that existed at the time. 13,000 settlements. For 7 decades under William I and 2 sons who succeeded him, Norman England strengthened its ties to continental Europe. Though it remained primarily a feudal agrarian society, towns such as London grew in size and power. Our next heading, murder in the Cathedral. Under the Normans, the Roman Catholic Church became even more entrenched in the social and political structure of the country. Though the first of the Plantagenet successors, King Henry II, crowned in 1154, wished to continue the relationship, he was thwarted by Thomas Becket. You want to circle that name? He'll be an important one. Whom he had appointed as Archbishop of Canterbury. Canterbury is a town outside of London. Once close to King Henry, Becket became an adversary when he was the powerful Archbishop defending the supremacy of church over state. The war, quote unquote, between the king and the cleric ended tragically when some of Henry's knights murdered Thomas Becket in Canterbury Cathedral in 1170. This is a huge moment. The rumor is that the king whispered under his breath a little louder than he should have, "I wish somebody would just put a sword through Becket," and several of his knights went down to Canterbury and did that very thing. Of course, killing Becket was a major no-no, and to do it in the cathedral in Canterbury in 1170 caused all kinds of problems. Now to continue, the Crusades. After Becket's murder, the Pope demanded that King Henry do penance by going on a crusade. In 1095, armies of European Christians responded to a papal plea to recapture the holy city of Jerusalem from Muslim forces. Continuing to 1229, there were a total of 6 crusades. So make sure you got your dates here, and notice 6 crusades, including a children's crusade in 1212. Although many English knights joined the crusades, only one English king, Henry II's son Richard, actually went to the Holy Land. Called Richard the Lionheart for his bravery, King Richard helped defeat enemy forces in Palestine during the Third Crusade of 1189 to 1192. The Magna Carta. When King Richard was killed in battle in 1199, his brother John gained the crown, becoming one of the most detested English rulers. From costly military blunders, including the loss of invaluable English claims in France, to political errors at home, King John found himself facing a serious rebellion by the barons or noblemen on whom he depended. Finally, We know this from our earlier reading. On June the 15th, 1215, the barons presented the king with a document we now call Magna Carta, or the Great Charter, much of which was a list of grievances against the king, similar to the Declaration of Independence, written more than 500 years later. Our Declaration of Independence, which is of course the birth document of our nation, is in large measure a byproduct of this moment in history, which is why it's such an important moment for us to point out. Embedded in Magna Carta were basic values related to freedom and power. The Charter made it clear that the king, as well as his people, were subject to the law, and it granted the right to a fair trial to all free men. Magna Carta set up a new paradigm for the relationship between a ruler and his or her subjects. The power of Parliament, our next heading. Magna Carta, notwithstanding power struggles between the king and his nobles, continued from reign to reign. English rulers had long sought the advice of nobles and later the church hierarchy. By the 13th century, the first parliament was established with representatives from across the country. The nobles and high churchmen were the beginning of what would become the House of Lords. Let's make sure we underline that one. And the knights, representing their shires and counties, were the beginnings of what would become the House of Commons. So you've got two different houses, the House of Lords and the House of Commons. Over time, Parliament would become more and more integral in the balance of power between the ruler and the ruled. The next heading, the Black Death. In October of 1347, catastrophe struck Europe, and the arrival of a plague from the east carried by rats and fleas. Within 5 years, it would kill more than 20 million people. Wow, you want to see that stat again. In 5 years, it would kill more than 20 million people. Sometime in 1348, the disease reached England, killing up to 40% of the population over the next 2 years. Called the Black Death because of the black boils it created on the skin of victims, the plague had a profound effect from the rapid loss of population to concerns that this was a divine punishment. Our next heading, Wars and More Wars. Conflict between England and France went on for centuries as the rights and province of English and French kings became increasingly intertwined, a situation that intermittently led to warfare. The 100 Years' War, fought off and on between the mid-1300s and the mid-1400s, was such a conflict. English and French kings and their forces engaged in years of fierce battles until the French finally consolidated control of all territory in continental France. The final heading, a new dynasty. Warfare at home did not end, however, as the descendants of King Edward III divided into two families, the Yorks and the Lancasters, often called the Wars of the Roses, after the symbols of the two families. The conflicts went on through the reigns of two York kings until the triumph of the Lancastrian Henry Tudor in 1485. We want to circle his name. He will be crucial for us in our study in Unit 3. As King Henry VII, he was the founder of the great Tudor dynasty that would rule until 1603. Now, of course, we are going to focus in our second unit primarily on Geoffrey Chaucer, and we will turn to him next in our introductory comments. Thank you.